episode of. Now, on this show, if you're joining us for the first time, this is a platform where we want to learn, unlearn, and relearn, make change agents of ourselves. And of course, it's a place where we want to be awesome and wholesome together. Now, it's just great to be back after a 4 week break. And wholesome. I have an echo. Okay, I have an echo there. I don't know why I have an echo there. Um, that's hmm. Okay. Now that's a bit of a problem because we did check this just now and it was working just fine. I think I still have an echo. Hmm. Bear with me. Most unfortunate. Um, I shouldn't have an echo. Okay, I'm just going to invite my guest to the screen. Femi, can you hear me? This is annoying. Okay, I'm just going to bring you guys to the screen, okay? I don't know why we're having this echo just now. Hello, Pamela. Welcome to Sincerely Agile with Mary.
Hello, Mary. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. We are echoing.
Yes, just a bit.
And are you echoing as well?
No, I'm not.
We are all echoing, unfortunately. Hmm. Okay, what do we do? Hello, Femi. Hello, Itopa. Unfortunately, there's a lot of echo. It's Should we go
Hello,
out and come back in, Femi?
hello, good evening. Can I just ask, please, does
Yes.
anyone have two devices that they're connected with? No?
I'm only on one device.
Me too.
Me too.
Itopa?
Yeah, same here. I actually tried going on mute as well to see if that helps, but it doesn't.
Pamela, you're muted right now.
I just was testing out to see if that was coming from me, but no, I only have one device.
Okay, I'll tell you what. Let me go out.
Okay.
Let me go out and come back in. Hopefully that helps. Um,
What if we say something now? Is it echoing?
No, it's not.
No, no. So it's coming from Mary.
Can I say my name to test?
Well, we can hear you.
Yes. And you only heard me once, and I'm not hearing feedback as well. So,
No.
okay.
Yeah, at least that is one hypothesis proven.
Oh, agilists. We just love
Yeah.
proving
And
hypotheses, don't we?
yes.
These
And
things
that's how we
happen.
solve problems.
Hello, everyone.
Good evening.
That's better.
Is it still echoing?
Mm,
Yes.
is
Oh,
I've got another hypothesis.
yeah.
Is that a Bluetooth headset by any chance?
It is a Bluetooth headset,
Okay, that could possibly be a
right?
cause. Is there a
Yeah.
wired?
Yes.
Yeah, because Bluetooth possibly has a short delay. Do you have a wired headset that we could possibly try?
Um,
Can you hear
will
me?
it? Yeah, I can hear you.
Is it echoing?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. We will. It is echoing. It is echoing. This is such a shame. I've
Should we
never had
all
this problem.
go out and come back? Because we've just tested you going.
Uh, um, because because I think the problem is from my end, was it?
It
Yes.
was, yes.
Yeah, I think it was from your end.
I'm just looking at my USB.
We can't hear you, Mary, if you're trying to speak to us.
Okay, am I still echoing?
It's
Mm,
better.
no.
Can you say your name?
Hello.
Okay. I can't hear any
I
echo.
can't hear echo now.
I
There's a
can't hear
delay.
echo, but I can hear our conversation nanoseconds after.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay. I'll tell you what. I'm going to come off, Femi. And if we can just continue with why diversity, equity, and inclusion is important.
I have another hypothesis just before you go, Mary. You
Yeah.
know, we're broadcasting on multiple channels. So, YouTube, LinkedIn. Do they all have those channels open?
That's correct.
Okay. I think they're picking up a sound. I think they're, whatever, it's picking up the sounds at different times.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me
Yes?
now?
Yes?
Yes.
That was the problem.
What was
That
the
was the
problem?
problem. My LinkedIn was still on,
Okay.
and I think I had one YouTube on another
Okay. I was
on
playing
another
that
tab.
back.
So,
I
Okay.
yes.
was playing that back. That got me really, really confused. Really, really confused. Anyway, these things happen when you go live. You never
They
know
do.
what will happen. So, but we're all here now, and we finally found that it was all my fault.
No,
But
it's
those
a learning opportunity. We've learned
absolutely,
something.
absolutely. Okay, so we have a few people join us already. We have Ronke on LinkedIn. We have Jimmy Kende. We have Messi here with us. We have BC Olabode. Thank you all for joining us, and apologies for the technical glitches from my end. Right. So today we have this amazing, amazing agilist here with me, and we're going to be having a conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion. To my, I think, upper right here, I've got Pamela. Pamela Ayodele, an agile coach. I've got Femi Odelusi right below me there. Femi Odelusi, who is also an agile coach. And then I have the one and only Itopa Sule, based in Canada, joining us in this all important conversation. So today we're starting with why diversity, equity, and inclusion is important. Itopa, do you want to, kick this off?
Yeah. For me, diversity, equity, and inclusion is about, first and foremost, it's about being able to bring your whole self to work.
Right.
We recognize that if we are not able to represent who we are, it has impact on how we engage with others at work. So for me, it starts from there. And of course, it extends to just being able to provide opportunity for everyone, for diverse groups, for different genders, different cultural backgrounds, to be able to work together in an environment. And it's also been proven that diverse teams, diverse organizations are more creative and make better decisions. So for me, it starts from self and then extends to how we include others and how we provide the necessary support for everyone to pursue the best versions of themselves.
Fantastic. Femi, what do you say to that?
Oh, well, that's such a hard act to follow up on. Thank you so much, Itopa. And all our viewers, good day to you wherever you are on the face of the earth. Well, what can I say? I've actually just demonstrated a little bit about diversity wherever you are, all over the world, all over the earth. That demonstrates the diverse aspects of our lives. Why diversity, equity, and inclusion? As the topic just mentioned, self. So for me, it also starts with the person. We are people, and we are people of different shades, characteristics, both physical, spiritual, emotional, linguistic, and the list goes on. And I'll tell you a little story. Many, many years ago, I grew up in a certain part of the world where our style of learning was reading and cramming. And I, for a long time, understood learning to be reading. As I grew and became a lot more aware of diversity, I started to learn about diverse learning styles. Some people don't enjoy reading or very not very good at reading. Maybe they're visualizers. Maybe they're eloquent in how they articulate themselves. And it's all okay, regardless of our learning style. It's all okay. Regardless of our belief systems, it's okay. Regardless of how we present ourselves and how we show up, as long as we maintain professionalism, as long as we adopt collaboration, as long as we bring about our humanity, and as long as we maintain a high degree of equity, those are the key values for me that makes DE&I absolutely important and critical. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Femi. Pamela, let's have your views, please.
Yeah, hi, good day, everyone. And thank you, Mary, for the opportunity to be on your show. So for me, diversity, equality, equity, the E is quite interchangeable there. And it's really important because for the fact that we're having this discussion right now also highlights that there is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts with recognizing that there is a problem with DE&I. And those three-letter acronyms are just really easy to roll off the tongue, but the impact it has had on us as individuals and in organizations is just unquantifiable at this point. So the fact that we have the opportunity to speak about it, to highlight the loopholes and everything we're facing is really important. And as Femi and Itupa has said, it starts with us as individuals and people, right? So can you imagine a world where everyone is just like you? It's going to be really boring.
Very, very boring.
Everybody has the same thought process. Everybody dresses like you. Everybody looks like you. Everybody smiles like you. That would be a very boring world. Going back to what Femi said in terms of education, different
Mm-hmm.
parts of the world have different ways in which education takes place.
Yeah.
And we have to understand that and appreciate that there is a difference. And that difference, recognizing that difference is really important because it impacts the way we teach, the way we employ, the way we do everything. So just recognizing that there is a diversity amongst us is really important. And the fact that we're speaking about it shows that there is an issue and it needs to be highlighted.
Absolutely, it is extremely important, and everybody needs to be carried along. And like you said, we can just roll those acronyms over our tongues, but it all starts with us. And that is what we're demonstrating here this afternoon. I mean, Sunday afternoon, we're all giving of our collective time to have this conversation because it is important. And it's important that we get it right. It's a conversation that has been on the table for a very long time. And what really gets me excited today is the new dimension this is now taking in terms of neurodiversity, which Femi is going to talk about later. And of course, Femi, you've also introduced a new word to us, inversity. We are really excited and we want to hear more about that. So now, Femi, let's go a little deeper with you. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. Tell us
Oh,
more about that.
absolutely. Now, for a very long time, there has been a great deal of focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the world started to mature through increased awareness. We started to understand that it's not enough to have diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then there was a recognition for the need to introduce justice. Now, I do not have the creative right for DEI and J. I ascribe that to an organization of which I am a member, and I believe that, in fact, all four of us here have that in common: International Coaching Federation. Part of their values includes, and not just the values, but also ethics. They have a statement on diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And to the best of my knowledge, they are the only entity across the world who has included the J, justice. And why specifically justice? Well, we've seen a few things that have happened in the world in the past 3 years, whereby there has been inhumanity of fellow human beings. So it's not okay to just advocate inclusiveness. And I'm careful not to just say inclusion, because inclusiveness and inclusion are separate things. Inclusiveness is more proactive. But when there is no inclusiveness, what next? What then? Where do we go? And here is where J comes in, justice. For many years, there's been contravention of our inclusiveness to the extent of criminality, illegality, and justice now brings about redress. Justice now brings in legality to address situations where there have been severe and serious contravention of our diversity, our equity, our inclusiveness. And I think justice correlates more to equity, because in law, there is a branch of law that deals specifically with equity.
Right.
And when there's inequitability, there's a
Mhm.
need for justice. And that's why J is very important.
Right. That sounds rather interesting. So, I guess when we start talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, that sort of gives us some kind of, should I say, comfort that the law is on our side when we start talking about, seeking equity in society. The law is
Absolutely so.
absolutely on our side. Fantastic. Thank
Absolutely.
you very much, Femi. Let me come to you, Pamela. Our topic here today, diversity, equity, and inclusion in agile and tech, right? So we
Mhm.
want to sort of go beyond that as well, like Femi has just done, but I want to come back to that agile and tech space, okay? Debunking the need to be technical But however, just before you fire away, let me just share some quotes here. Now, this is a quote from Mick Kirsten. Those who master large-scale software delivery will define the economic landscape of the 21st century. Mick Kirsten, Project to Product. BMW Group CEO, they expect that in their future, more than half of its R&D staff will be software developers. Now, BMW, they are car makers. Let's not forget that. They make cars, okay? But they more than half of their R&D staff are going to be software developers. Apple today, as we know it, they are the biggest watchmaker. Now, coming back to debunking the need to be technical. Now, the quotes I have just shared with you there, what does that tell us? It tells us that, you know what? Every organization today, every company is more or less a software company. It's a digital company. That simply means there will be more opportunities going forward. Okay. But it seems that there's a misconception that if you're in a digital space, you must be technical. Over to you, Pamela, please.
Yes, I mean, you're very right, and that quote is quite interesting. A lot of organizations are basically moving from a more project-based method to a more product-led way of delivery, which is being done for a few reasons. And you're right, a lot of companies are becoming more software companies as opposed to any other thing. So you find car manufacturers that are becoming very, very product-led, product-driven, and we can see that in the kind of products that are being put to market now. But also, it is also creating new work, new opportunities, and a whole new industry is being carved from that migration from project-based delivery to product-based delivery. And in terms of technicality, to be very honest, anything you don't know about is technical. So, for example, if I want to train to be an opera singer and I don't know anything about opera,
Yes.
there's a technicality that goes behind singing, which I don't know about. So the fact that people have that impression or have been given that impression that you need to be technical, first and foremost, what is the definition of technical? What do you mean by technical? And within the digital space, we have different opportunities. I'm not technical, but I work within a technical digital space. So it's quite interesting. And I think I really want to debunk this myth, especially for the young, up and coming young ones or people that are looking to transition from their traditional way of working into a more digital and eclectic way of working. So to be very honest, technicality for me, there are many roles within the digital space. Like I'm an agile coach and I can be a scrum master as well. And I am not technical in any shape, form, or manner because I don't have a software engineering background, but you're working with technical teams. And to be able to do that, you don't need to be technical. So there's a whole conversation around technicality that's beginning to bubble up, which I'm really getting all excited about because we need to understand that we don't need to be technical to be wherever we want to be within the digital world.
Absolutely. And when you think of a hospital, everybody is not a surgeon.
Exactly.
Everybody is not
Exactly.
a surgeon in a hospital. There are different roles. You've got admin staff, okay?
Exactly.
You've
In
got the
Apple, you've got
recruitment.
marketing. Yeah.
Exactly. You've got marketing. And the
Yeah.
same goes for the digital space. You have people who are UI, UX professionals, right? You have people, all they do is they deal with data, but it's all still that digital space. Femi, what do you say to that? What can you add to
I,
that? Anything?
I couldn't agree more with Pamela about what she's just said there. There needs to be technical in the context of agile.
Mhm.
Yes, many years ago that held true, but the world is changing, constantly changing. And one of the things that is bringing about that change in the need for technical background, guess what?
Mhm.
I actually attribute that to diversity
Mhm.
and inclusion. Agile applies in a diverse range of industries, with
Mhm.
a diverse range of skill sets, with a diverse range of professions. And I've been to a barber shop before. Please don't laugh because you're going to ask me, why on earth am I going to a barber shop when I've got no hair? Okay. I took my sons to a barber shop, and I actually observed the processes with which they were working, and they were agile. They had a constant feedback loop, and they had an iterative approach to work. Barbershop. And then I'm going to share another one. I went to a butcher's shop. I could not believe seeing agile in action. Now, are those technical professions? Yes, in their respective domains, they are technical, but they're not software development environments. So the need for agility in software technical environment is debunked. It applies in almost every profession in the world of
Mm-hmm.
today.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Itopa, you were going to say something.
Yeah, the other dimension that I want to add to this diversity is if you look at any typical company or organization,
Mm-hmm.
the customer base is diverse.
Absolutely.
You're not producing your product for a specific group of people, so it's diverse. So what we thought at the beginning, we mentioned the fact that companies that exhibit diversity make better decisions. Why is that? It's because you are able to bring different perspectives to the table. So sometimes we look at diversity as if it's a way to bring more people into the industry. It's actually beneficial to the industry. It's a necessity to
Mm-hmm.
bring diverse voices to the table so that you can address the diverse needs of your customers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's I mean, there's a return on investment there, or should I say, competitive advantage to have diversity in all those spaces.
Yeah.
But more importantly, we're also putting out the message out there for people, because one of the things we're doing on this platform is to encourage more people to come into the agile space and into the tech space. But one misconception we or should I say misinformation, is that people think for them to come into this agile and technical space, the first thing that is coming up in their head is, oh, I have to code. I have to code. You don't always have to code. Like I just said, and not everyone that works in a hospital is a surgeon, right? There are different areas within that space that you can, take up. Business analysts, for example, business analysis is something we do all day long. We do that all day long. We're analyzing stuff, and these are transferable skills we can take from, jobs we've been doing for years into the technical space, because everything is now, in the software domain, in the digital space. So that is so important.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you for your contributions there. Now, Femi, I can't wait to hear this one. Diversity and inversity. What is inversity, please? Educate
Absolutely
us.
correct. Now, um, full credit to this source. There's a contact of mine on LinkedIn, and her name is Karen Foster. Karith Foster, Kairth Foster. And she used to be a diversity, equity, and inclusion expert
Right.
until she had an aha moment. And she was invited to a radio show, a talk show, um, to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then a few things started to unfold.
Mm-hmm.
And then she had that epiphany of reflection and reinvention. And she now came up with this word called inversity. Now, if we analyze it, inversity is inclusion and diversity merged into one. Full disclosure, she trademarked this name.
Right.
Now, what exactly is it? It's a new word for most of us. And all it does is it takes the division out of the traditional DEI programming by offering a more inclusive way, but in a specific manner. And that specific manner is to enhance communication, to embrace learning, and to create an environment vital to organizations' successes. Now, inversity in itself is a way for ensuring that organizations do not pay lip service to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We cannot talk about DEI without referring to George Floyd.
Mm.
Hmm.
And we all know what happened with enterprises across the world with George Floyd. It now became, unfortunately, an opportunity for organizations to show their support merely by changing the logo to black and white and just, putting up, putting out their media statements that you can read and understand, but you don't see any manifestation behind the statements being put out. Inversity takes that division out of traditional DEI, and as I said, it creates the opportunity for communication and creates a learning environment, which is vital to organizations bringing DEI to life. It accomplishes this by creating and supporting brave environments. And I know someone who's very, very close to these two words that I've just mentioned, brave environments, i.e., psychological safety. Okay? And in so doing, once you've created the brave environment, it enables individuals to hold courageous conversations, which are based on intentional language, positive psychology, and neuroscience. Now, that's a different topic altogether because I have an article about the neuroscience of neurodiversity and inclusion. But let's not divert into that yet. Let's stay with inversity. With inversity, it's behavioral rather than something that is obvious. So organizations embrace inversity by having safe environment, communication channels, and environments where we can test and learn our belief systems. That's in a nutshell. But to learn a lot more about it, we need hours.
So essentially, what I'm picking up from what you said, Femi, is that this is taking the responsibility for diversity, equity, and inclusion to another level of responsibility, so that we're not just paying lip service to it, but actually, being proactive and acting to ensure that the gains, if you like, of
Absolutely.
diversity, equity, and inclusion are actually, realized.
If I could borrow 20 more seconds,
Yeah.
and approach this by a process of exclusion. Inversity is not about ignoring or dismissing issues of bias, unconscious or conscious issues. Inversity is not about promoting a philosophy that perpetuates the blame or shame game. That's not what it's about. And it's certainly not about propagating the narrative of victims and villains. That's not what it's about, because that's the karma triangle. When we start talking about victims and villains and all that. Inversity is about maximizing positive outcomes, intentional positivity for everyone participating in the conversation. Essentially, it's about sitting down and having those conversations.
And what I also pick from that is also the fact that it's everybody's responsibility.
Absolutely. You've got that spot on.
It's everybody's responsibility. Itopa, Pamela, you want to add to that?
Yeah, just quickly, it's everyone's responsibility. And as organizations go through this, it's important that we're creating that environment that allows those conversations to happen. So I know shortly we'll talk about what organization can do, but there's a link there. Individual and then the support system that is required.
Absolutely. And that just takes us, like you said, to this one here. So, what policies and governance, Ethiopia, must be in place for organizations to actually, achieve diversity, equity, and inclusion? Because, like Femi said earlier on, we don't want this to be just a lip service. So,
Yep.
what can organizations do to actually put the right policies and governance in place?
Yeah. When we look at it from the organizational perspective,
Mm-hmm.
it's very important that we're looking at it holistically.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about diversity, it's easy to say, let's diverse our workforce. Let's make sure that we have different people here.
Mm-hmm.
Then we go into the equity. Are we giving the right support for people to pursue the opportunities, to pursue the outcomes that is good for them, irrespective of their diverse nature as individuals? And then the third thing is, are we supporting people wherever they come from, wherever diverse group they belong to? Do we include them? Do they feel that they are part of the larger group?
Mm-hmm.
So specific steps. Number one is to understand where you are as an organization. So data is important. And when you start to look at your data, it's very easy to look at overall and say, hey, we have this here, we have that here, we seem to be diverse. Until you start looking at the different layers. Within the upper layer, most of the research that I have seen at the senior management level, at the senior leadership level, not as diverse as at the lower cadre level. So for organizations that are paying lip service to this, it's easy to just bring an aggregation of everything and say, hey, but we're doing very well, until you start to look into the details. So I'll say the first thing organizations can do is look at your data, not from high level, but from different for different layers, and begin to reflect on what you can do. The second, and some of you have talked to it already, is training around our unconscious bias, trainings around communication, trainings around the language we use, inclusive language or non-inclusive language. There are, in North America today, there's a lot of conversation about the Scrum Master role. There are specific groups where the master word is triggering. One of my colleagues reflect that when he went home the first day and said he has just become a Scrum Master, the others in the group just look at him, master what? So inclusive language, depending on the and specific place we are, is another important aspect. And then how are we hiring? How are we training our hiring managers? How are we looking at applicants? There are tons of research out there that if you just remove the gender and the name, you get a totally different outcome from the pool of the same applicants. So those are the areas that we invite companies to look at: data, understanding your data, training, and then looking at your hiring. There are other things that you need to do, that now that you've got the right diverse group in place, how do you support them? So we can talk about that.
Absolutely, Tupa, and that is so important. It's important that you talk about recruitment. And I saw an article recently on LinkedIn about how one young lady had to change her name. And the moment she changed her name, she got more, she got invited to more interviews. She was seen. She was seen to be, the ideal candidate that they could call for an interview after she changed her name. But that's, a whole different conversation. But recruitment is very important because that is the gateway to these organizations. So it is important that they have the right policies to really, not just pay lip service to diversity and inclusion, but actually to be proactively, doing the right things to ensure that they meet up to that. Now, talking about inclusion, or rather data, I could come into an organization and look around and say, okay, this looks like a diverse organization, but is there inclusiveness? which you were talking about earlier, Femi, is there inclusiveness. So I could be working within an organization, but I have no inclusion safety, I have no learner safety, I have no contributor safety, and I have no challenger safety. I'm just there to make up the numbers so that the organization can say, tick, 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 we have met the diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. End of story. So yes, we've got a thing going on there. Pamela, do you want to say something to that?
Yes, this is a very dear topic to me in terms of diversity and inclusion. And it's very, very sad that in this day and age, we're still having this same challenges, because I think we've spoken about this in different iterations. And as Femi highlighted, that George Floyd unfortunately brought out a lot of these issues that were just simmering and boiling and just waiting to bubble over. But it's had a good impact and also a negative impact in the way organizations are beginning to do things. And policies and governance are an enabler. They are a very good enabler. Just like in Agile, we have enabler stories and things like that. I think without a good, strong policy and governance within your organization, it's almost impossible to justify the way people behave. So basically, and what I mean by that is the fact that unless diversity, inclusion, justice, equity, and everything is at the forefront of leadership conversations, it becomes impossible, because there probably will be pockets of changes within the organization. But I think we need further and more in-depth conversations with regards to this. It is uncomfortable for a lot of people to speak about these things, but I think we have come to a point in addressing this situation that nothing should be out of bounds. You go to work, you want to bring your full self, and we talk about psychological safety. You're in a team and you're not safe. You're in an organization and your interest is not being promoted. That affects you psychologically, mentally, emotionally, in every single way, because you're being undermined. And another thing organizations should look at is instead of basically solutionizing the problem, speak to the people.
Speak to the people.
Exactly. Because it's a conversation, as Itopa has rightly said, right? Data is there. But a lot of time we're not scratching, we're just looking at surface data, which has to do with the leadership team and everything. But the thing is that the higher you go within a lot of organizations, the less diverse it is. It's either you don't find anyone that looks like you, and if you do, you don't find anyone that looks like your gender. And I'm referring to me myself as a woman. You understand? So there are different levels in which this diversity actually affects you. It affects men in a certain way, and it affects Black women in a certain type of way. And the more we have to talk about these conversations, the more we have to highlight them and make sure that organizations are being held to account, because we actually make a very strong percentage of the workforce.
Absolutely.
And I think our inclusion in these conversations, we need a seat at the table. And I think a lot of organizations have to begin to open up their discourse and open up the opportunities to allow us to be able to express ourselves and be heard, and not just heard, and seen as well, because representation matters in every way. In every way. I need the younger generation to see people like me in places of authority, in places of change, in places of influence. So it's really, really, really important. Transparency is another problem we're facing, where the data is there, but it's not transparent. Data can be interpreted in any which way.
In so many ways, yeah.
Exactly. So I think it's really important that it becomes an organizational problem, if you know what I mean, as opposed to bringing an organizational solution. Because the first thing is identifying the problem.
Yeah.
And the second thing is making it as the same way as we have budgets as part of the discussion. We should have diversity, inclusion, and all that as part of the board meeting. Let's talk about it. What are the problems we're facing? How do we begin to tackle it? Let it be somebody's primary role to look into these things. The same way as we have a CFO, a CIO, and all the IOs and all the other job titles. The same way we should make it part of our recruitment.
A strategic focus.
Exactly.
It's a strategic focus, essentially. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Femi, let me come back to you with neurodiversity.
Okay,
Now,
thank you.
Itopa has just talked about things that we can do. Pamela has, expanded on that. She's talked about, diversity in terms of women. And I mean, we women, we have to work twice as hard, isn't it, Pamela? We have to work
Yes,
twice as
true.
hard. But when we talk about diversity, it's not just about gender. It's not just about race. We've talked about, George Floyd. It's not just about race. It's not just about gender. It's more than
Yes,
that. And this is what gets me excited when we talk about, diversity, equity, and inclusion. That we are finally, as a people, because you said something about humanity when we started, Femi. This is
yes,
about a service to humanity. Okay. This is service
yes.
to humanity because when we talk about neurodiversity, there's actually, let me actually bring it up. I believe I have it here. Absolutely. There you go. There you go. Here it is. Let me share that with you. According to the United Kingdom charity ADHD
That's
Aware,
the one.
30 to 40% of the population are neurodivergent.
That's
30 to
correct.
absolutely. But check this out. CIPD poll of UK HR professionals found that 72% said that neurodiversity was not part of their organization's people management practices.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, we're talking about 40% of the population. That is huge. So, Femi, please tell us about
Right.
neurodiversity. Why
Thank
is
you.
that so important?
Thank you so much for that, Mary. And you've actually saved me a ton of time by using the reference that I was going to use for my discussion. So it could have been a little bit heavy for me trying to explain percentages. So that charity that you referred to, ADHD Aware, their focus was on the fact that there is something called neurodiversity. Just as we have inversity that I touched on earlier on. Now, when I talk about any form of versity, it's very difficult for me to restrict it to diversity, inversity, neurodiversity, inclusiversity. They're all the same thing. Can I just quickly revisit inversity? And I'm going to cross reference it back to neurodiversity. Some of the findings from Kenneth Foster was that traditional diversity, equity, and inclusion training has always been focused from the outside in. So, bring in a few consultants. They come in and impose policies and impose new ways of thinking. Inversity, on the other hand, advocates an inside out approach. Inversity has 7 pillars. Now, when I go through these pillars, you're now going to see how they relate to neurodiversity. And please bear with me. There's no specific order of these pillars. So, just for awareness sake, you've got actualization, i.e., human actualization. You've got awareness, i.e., human awareness. You've got reception, how we receive and perceive. You've got courage, the courage to stand up and say what is right and do what is right. You've got conscious communication. The key word there is conscious. Then you've got grace and you've got energy. Now, let's see how that maps to neurodiversity. The finding that you referred to by ADHD Aware that indicates, now, Mary, you mentioned 40%. You've actually gone for the top end. Let's even just look at the 30%, which is the bottom end. 30% of the UK population are neurodivergent. What does that mean? That's a terminology that has been coined by the National Symposium on Neurodiversity. And there are so many different types or categories that fall into the neurodivergent bucket. So you have things like dyspraxia, dyslexia, ADHD, dyscalculia, autism, Tourette syndrome, and the list goes on. Now, it is shocking that only 16% of autistic adults in the UK are in full-time paid employment in the UK,
Hmm.
compared with 47% of people who have a disability and 80% of people who are not living with a disability. 80% of the people who are not living with a disability are in full-time paid employment, whereas only 30% of those who have a neurodiversity or who are neurodiverse are in employment. So the study goes on to highlight so many benefits of having neurodiversity in the workplace. Okay? And some of the benefits include having your teams equipped with new perspectives. One fact of life is this: we are not all the same. By bringing people who are different, it strengthens our perspectives. If you take, for instance, I was sharing an example of a company that is developing consoles for the likes of PlayStation and Xbox. And they test those consoles with people who have a form of ability, physical ability. Do you know what? They never thought of trying those same consoles with people of a different type of ability until someone said, how about those who have less physical ability? Can you try it with them as well? Because you've got to be compliant with them. It's the same thing with neurodiversity, different ways of thinking. Our brains are wired differently. And the list goes on. Now, what is the solution? The solution is increased awareness. The solution is including things such as initiatives such like Inversity that talks about inside out change rather than outside in change. There have been so many case studies about the benefits of Inversity, about the benefits of approaching neurodiversity. Now, aside from neurodiversity, I also, through a great colleague of mine, Gemma Honor, got to realize the benefits of different learning styles. I just used to look at people who doodle as hobbyists until I realized that they learn by sketching or visualizing their thought process.
Yeah.
My colleague Gemma Ono and a few other people who are visual illustrators, when we're having sessions, she actually translates all the communications that are going on into a visual map and puts the map on the wall and say, that's what we've been doing for the past hour.
That's the minute.
That is a form of neurodivergence.
Yeah, it is. We learn in so many different ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that particularly struck a chord with me. It's very easy to judge based on our perceived biases, our unconscious biases. I have, if you permit me 2 seconds, I have 2 kids. Okay, one of them is an avid reader. She will read anything you throw to her. The other one doesn't care at all about reading. In fact, when she was younger, we thought it was just her age. So we're buying all the comic books. Today, she still reads the comic books. She will never take any textbook to start reading. Anything that is visual, anything that is moving, that is where her attraction. That's how she learns. So even within the house, we need to also start to think of diversity, because it's very easy. I mean, lack of knowledge at the beginning, like, look at what your sister is doing. You should be doing the same thing.
Comparing
And coercing and forcing to go one way or the other. So diversity is very important. Another thing that I want to add is, it doesn't matter So sometimes we talk about the voices in the room. As coaches, we want
Yeah.
to make sure that all the voices in the room are heard. Now, it doesn't matter whether it's a small voice or big voice. That perspective that the small voice brings, as important as the perspective that the bigger voice brings to the table. So
Absolutely.
diversity makes us all better. And I joke that diversity is good business.
It is good business. It is definitely good business because, like you said, you're better for it as an organization because you have different perspectives, different type of creativity. I mean, just to buttress your point about your children, my grandson is on the spectrum, but he does some pretty amazing things as well. He doesn't talk just yet. He's about 4 years old, but he has something for numbers.
Hmm.
Hmm.
He has something for numbers that we're beginning to see. If you're walking down the car park, for example, he goes to the plate of a car and touches a number, and he expects you to tell him. Now, I was walking here on my table the other day. He knows his numbers 1 to 100 because he has a tablet with all these numbers and pictures and everything. He knows the animals, but he doesn't speak. He joined me on my table right here. I was walking and he started to type with my keyboard. And then I said 112. I didn't realize he knew up to 100 at the time. So I then said, I just called out a random number, 112. And guess what he wrote? He wrote 100, 100, and 12. But that got me really excited because it just shows that he has a thing for numbers. So,
Perception.
yeah, exactly. He does have a thing for numbers. He remembers a lot of stuff, but he does not speak just yet. This conversation is important to me. As a grandmother to a son who is on the spectrum, I want to know more about how I can help him.
Can I
How,
just quickly say something that
yes,
touched my heart when you mentioned the
yes,
spectrum?
yes.
Up until a few years ago, my thought process was binary, that you're either on this at this end
Hmm.
or the other end.
Exactly.
Taking autism as an example,
Hmm.
I used to think that you're either autistic
Or
or
you're
not
not.
autistic
There's a
until
spectrum,
I
apparently.
started to work with people
Hmm.
who are on a scale, one
Absolutely.
way or another.
Absolutely.
Majority of people
Hmm.
fall on either end of the spectrum. Either
Absolutely.
end.
Also,
Either way, somewhere.
can I
Yeah.
just add something quickly? I think we've got a couple of minutes left. I think within where we are, within our context in Europe, in North America, and everything, we have the opportunity to be able to understand and have all these resources available to
Hmm.
us. So, my question or my curiosity will be people in other countries that are not really, because educational system does not necessarily permit that way of basically being able to diagnose children early on in life. So I think also awareness should be raised,
Hmm.
within those spaces as well, because I mean,
Absolutely.
we sit here and basically we're talking about neurodiversity and everything, and some
Mm.
people are just like, okay, maybe my child is on the spectrum, but where do I even begin to get help from?
Where do I
Where,
begin?
where do I
Absolutely.
go? Especially if you're not in an environment where it's not classed as being dumb, because you have
Yeah.
to be intentional about the way you communicate these things. So I think I should just
Absolutely.
put that out there that, it
Absolutely.
might be a pointer to begin to look at your, environment in a very different way and
Hmm.
seek help where you can get help from in terms of, um, that kind of thinking and neurodiversity and all that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Pamela, I'm coming back to you with prioritizing professional development. Well, I will go over the hour, so don't worry about that.
Okay, all right.
Prioritizing professional development. I mean, we have been talking a lot about organizations, what they need to do. We talked about data, we talked about policies, but let us also take some responsibility here. So, what do you say about prioritizing our own personal and professional development?
See, my question here would be if you're not prioritizing your professional development, who will do that for you?
Exactly.
If you're not prioritizing yourself and your improvement and your everything, who would do that for you? Nobody's going to do that for you. So it definitely is your responsibility to make sure that you are skilled, upskilled, trained, whatever it is you need to do. It is really important. I would not lie, it is time intensive, it is expensive sometimes, but we have different ways in which we can do that. Professionalism is exactly what it is. And sometimes that is the only true measure of your skill initially before people begin to know your experience, begin to know you, or even begin to hear about you. So I think sometimes we tend to be sometimes very lazy about ourselves, especially if you're coming from a place of where you work in a full-time job and you have all these other responsibilities. But at the same time, as we're talking about diversity, inclusion, and all that, right? Prof- um, Prioritizing your professional development has a place to do with that as well, because sometimes it's the only way you actually will get heard and seen. Because I have been in that situation where, you know, it was because of my professional development on my CV that I even got an audience with the recruiter. So I think sometimes we tend to just backtrack and just look at it as another person's responsibility, but it's your responsibility. Your organization, if you happen to be in an organization that would train you, that is all well and good, but it's still your responsibility because it's not going to fall on your lap. You actually have to be proactive about it, and it opens doors. Sometimes people talk about why do I need all these certifications? Why do I need all these qualifications? But the truth of the matter is that if you're not growing, you're dying. If you're not growing, you are dying. So you need to experience growth. And it opens a whole load of other communities to you. Like, for example, the Agile community. The Agile community has been such really kind to me because I became very proactive and intentional about my growth, about my professional development, not as any other thing, but within the agile space. So it's really important, and I think we need to begin to invest in ourselves. We need to be able to look at our lives. We need a roadmap, basically. So if you have a roadmap, and I think that's something that Femi is really good at in terms of helping create that professional roadmap. And between Femi, Itopa, and Mary, they have a fantastic wealth of knowledge when it comes to agile professional development and everything. So you guys should hit them up, at some point.
And there you are taking yourself out of the
Oh
picture.
my
You're
God,
just as
Pamela.
you know. So yeah, but jokes aside, we go to university to study to become professionals and everything. It doesn't end there.
it
Your
doesn't.
university education is just the base. It's just the basic, because half of the time what you study at university, a lot of people don't end up working with it. No, there's no university course that says this is how to be an agile coach, or this is how to be a scrum master, or this is how to be XYZ. So you have to be intentional about your training, and joining professional bodies also gives you some perks.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
really, really important, and it helps you to it introduces new conversations, new networks. So professional development is something that I cannot overemphasize. It's really important. As I said, if you're not learning, you're dying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You need to learn something, professionally, to be able to even climb up the career path.
Yeah.
So it's really
Yeah.
important.
I also hear you there talk about diversifying our professional development, because it's good to say, well, I have achieved this. What else do I need?
Yeah.
Right? I'm already a project manager. I don't know what that agile is all about, or what business analysis is all about. But here we're talking about diversity, and what if nothing, we learned today that the more perspectives you have, the better you are. The same thing
Absolutely.
applies to your professionalism. The more diversity you have in your professional development, the more perspectives you have, the more exposure you have, to Pamela's point, and the
Yeah.
more opportunities you have being part of different communities. So I can't
Absolutely.
overemphasize that.
Absolutely. And thank you for linking it that way, because you see, one thing I often say is that yes, we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We talk about how we want more people of color. in the tech space, in the agile space. But one thing I always say is, what am I doing to make sure that when those opportunities come, I am ready? Okay, that I
Can I
do
quickly
qualify. Yeah.
can I quickly share something?
Yes,
A small
please.
nugget that came to me now.
Yes, please.
When we talk about inclusion, the
Yeah.
first two letters are IN.
Yes.
In reality, it's innovation. We've got to be innovative
Innovative.
to
I
head
like that.
towards inclusion.
I love that,
And it
Femi.
goes back to Pamela's point
Hmm.
about, reinventing ourselves,
Absolutely.
continuous development. We've got to be innovative about ourselves, about our minds,
Hmm.
about how we renew ourselves, and then
And
we
we
can
can do
be
it at any
included.
age.
Yeah.
And we
Absolutely.
can
Yeah.
do it at any
Oh,
age. Let me throw that in.
yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Let,
Age is
let
never
me
a barrier.
age is not a barrier. You can do that at any age. I mean, I started my IC Agile cohort last year. I started another ICF cohort this year, talking about, just going on and on and on and learning more and more, because the moment we stop learning, we're dying essentially. So we have to take those, the responsibility, the initiative to develop ourselves, because these opportunities, nobody's going to knock the door and say, Mary, hey, how are you? This is for you. That's
And
not going to happen.
And to just add to that, to be very honest, I
Yeah.
think we need to be very strategic.
Yeah.
We need to be very strategic and, and intentional about our personal growth and about our rights, because we're saying that we want more diverse people in places of management and all that. But if
Hmm.
we're not preparing ourselves, then when the time comes for that
Hmm.
promotion, you will be looked, you'll be looked over because you're not qualified.
Exactly.
You have to take that, you have to be very intentional about preparing yourself, because all that hard work will pay dividend, especially if you are making time out to make sure that you have the correct qualifications. And statistics actually shows that as people of color, we need to work 2 3 4 times harder to be able to get the same space and opportunity as our white counterparts will have. So if you're not being intentional about your professional development, that means you're doing yourself a disservice by not preparing yourself. You understand? You're not going to cook a meal without the ingredients. So
Yep.
take the professional development as the ingredients, prepping for a very fantastic meal at the end of it. So you have to be very strategic. You have to be very mentally aware, prepared, and socially aware of the challenges we face as people of color.
Absolutely.
It's real. So with that in mind, you just have to be very conscious in terms of prepping yourself, and we've got very fantastic bodies around that you can, help you do that.
I mean, these are interesting times to be a professional, for crying out loud.
It
We've
is.
got the internet, we've got social media, we've got meetup groups, we've got YouTube, we've got Google. We've got no excuse at all.
And
And
we
that,
got Sincerely Agile with Mary.
You
thank you
just
so
read
much,
my
Femi.
mind there.
And these are all free content, isn't it?
It's all free content, so we have no excuse at all. But having said all of that, we need to invest in ourselves. We need to really, really, save up and invest in ourselves. I'm doing that, and the dividends are, they are coming. Now, Femi, on the screen, as you can see, we have a question that I would like you to attend to, if you don't mind, please.
Absolutely. The question reads, how does neurodiversity measure against academic ability?
Hmm.
That's a powerful, thought-provoking question. Two things there. Measurement of neurodiversity, academic ability. Traditionally, society has measured our academic ability based on this end of the spectrum of neurodiversity, i.e., to excel in your academic learning, you've got to read books, write exams, and pass the exams. And when you pass those exams, you get a graduation gown, you get a certificate. But hold on a second. What about individuals with dyslexia? What about kinesthetics who are not able to put words together? These are all forms of neurodiversity. What about those who their ADHD does not allow them to read 3 lines from start to finish, because by the time they get to the end of the first line, they can't start the second line. Does that mean they cannot excel academically? Thankfully, because of all these initiatives of diversity, equity, and inclusiveness, I think we're going to need to make sure we change it from inclusion to inclusiveness. Academic institutions are now changing such that you can submit your academic assessments by video recording or audio recording. You can speak rather than write it, because we can't not all write equally. Someone can assess you by listening to your, by assessing your recording. Now, is that the final solution? There's still a long way to go. I don't think the problems, moving beyond the question that was asked, I don't think the problem is with academic ability. I think the problem is more beyond academic ability when you want to enter the employment market. If you look at the modern system of employing individuals, first you have to write a CV or fill out an application form. What if I'm dyslexic or I have an inability to write an application form? And then when they assess my application form, they call me for an interview. What if I cannot perform well at interviews due to nervousness or neurodiverse predisposition? And I go there and I start to stammer or stutter.
Yeah.
And then they offer me the job based on what I say. What if I'm the kind of person who could go there and sell ice to people who live in the ice region, who don't need ice cubes? So the question about how does neurodiversity measure against academic ability, the short answer is that things are changing. Academic institutions are now recognizing neurodiversity. Believe it or not, color blindness is a form of neurodiversity.
Yep.
If someone is projecting an image on the screen that you're learning virtually and you cannot see the colors, what chance do you stand? So those who project images are now being taught about the diversity requirements, of images. So I hope and I sincerely think that academic ability is not solely based on your ability to read and write. It should be based more about you and how you can excel in whatever your chosen format is.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Very
I
well
hope that
explained.
answers and helps the person who asked the question.
Yes, unfortunately, we haven't got the person's name showing, but you've done is justice to that, in my opinion. And you've talked about inclusiveness. You've repeated that word a lot, and this is what comes to mind when you talk about inclusiveness. You
Can
know,
I just explain the difference between inclusion and inclusiveness?
yes,
This
please,
will take me a few seconds.
yes,
Inclusion gives an impression of something you do at one point in time.
time.
Inclusiveness is an ongoing, never ending activity.
Activity is part and parcel of the culture, okay, of that
Absolutely.
institution. And I think this just explains it for me. 1962, we remember a janitor was asked at NASA what he was doing, and he said, "I'm here to help put a man on the moon." Now, to me, this is a janitor who feels included. This is a janitor that really understands the assignment, so to speak. Okay, someone who believes that what, it doesn't matter if I'm doing this much and someone else is doing that much. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And this is how we need to start thinking. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. I always make reference to this janitor's response, because I think it just drives home the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how you can get so much more from everybody if that is your culture, right? So much more, because this is somebody who is doing whatever it is they are doing beyond. I mean, their mindset is beyond that cleaning. They are thinking of what it will take to get someone to the moon. So, in other words, to put this in perspective, if I'm a cleaner and the people who are just about to enter this rocket are coming to use the toilet, I want to make sure that they are not going to slip and fall. I mean, we might look at it as a small thing. Imagine the leader who is supposed to be in this jet just decides to quickly use the bathroom just for the benefit of this conversation, and he slips and falls. I mean, that mission has been interrupted, or you would have lost somebody in that team. So we need to pay attention. Every role counts, everybody counts, everybody adds value, everybody brings something to the table. I just thought I'll highlight that. Now, let's take the last one, which is our role to redress the imbalance in DE&I. I mean, like we have said, we don't just want to play lip service to this. Here we are, all four of us, on a Sunday, giving, like I said before, our collective time to this conversation. That is because we want to play our part here. I'm a mentor. Everybody here is a mentor. I'm a mentor. Femi, Itopa, Pamela, we are all mentors. We are mentoring people to come into this space. So what are some of the things we can do? You already talked about one, Pamela. You said we should prioritize our personal development. Okay. We should invest in ourselves, because we need to start with ourselves. We can't give what we don't have, right? We can't give what we don't have. Continue to have the conversation. Active participation. Pamela, I heard you mention that earlier on. Knowledge sharing, which is what we're doing right here, right now. Readily sharing information, mentoring people, sharing information of vacancies, anything else that we can do. What else can you add?
Based on my life experience, I think I've always been in one end of the room. Either I'm alone in that room, or I'm not in the room. I'm just passing by the window, and I say that, okay, this what's going on here may
Okay.
actually impact me. So one of the things that I start to do, apart from publicly offering mentoring and mentorship to anyone who is willing, and sharing as much as I can. Because if I want to see more like me, Pamela talked about representation, which is key to diversity. Then I should also be able to help other people see how to get to wherever I am. So I do that, and I encourage everyone to do that. Representation is very important. The other thing I do is wherever I work, I always make sure that we start organizing ourselves into what we call employee network or resource groups. So this could be, I'm never in less than 3 at a time, either as a contributor or as an ally, because in as much as we identify commonalities in the different groups that we belong, there's also an opportunity, because we're in that position, to empathize. Mary talked about, we are female, we're Black. That's different levels of diversity, right? So, and I'm coming from as a Black male in North America. That's one form of diversity. As somebody who stammers a bit, that's one form of diversity. So I now have the empathy to recognize what the other people are going through. So I'm participating either as part of my group to ensure that we have the right representation, and also partnering with others that I think we also need to be supported on that journey. Those are the few things that I am doing personally, and I invite everyone, whatever it's possible in your space, to do.
And from yourself, Femi?
Thank you so much for that. What a hard act to follow. I say that once again. Um, so, a few words have already been shared that actually resonate with what I believe needs to be done personally by myself as an individual, but collectively by ourselves as people with common interest. Now, I mentioned inversity earlier on. I'm a catalyst for change. I'm an agent of change. And I'm someone who goes in and makes things happen. Do you know what? Oftentimes people ask me at work that what do I do? And I struggle to answer the question because I don't even know what I do. All I know is that I just make things happen. I just go in and sometimes I just hold conversations or I initiate conversations or I support people in having conversations. So, what can we do? What can I do? Igniting conversations within organizations. When I say organizations, please do not misconstrue this to mean the place where I work and get my paycheck. Any form of organization where human beings are interacting with one another is an organization. The list is endless.
It is.
And I'm not going to start with any. Now, that's one thing. Another thing, Pamela mentioned something that is very, very dear to my heart earlier on. I'm a roadmap enthusiast. I was going to use the word fanatic, but that might bring some negative connotation. I'm an enthusiast for roadmaps. And what is the essence of roadmaps? It's a bit like driving on the road with no road signs telling you where you're heading for, or driving in a car or a form of transportation that does not tell you distance and time. That's what a roadmap means to me. Now, bringing it closer to home, I just help people to A, understand the essence of having a roadmap, B, the essence of building a roadmap, C, the essence of working to their roadmap, and as in true agile form, constantly inspecting, adapting, pivoting, responding, getting feedback, and continuing that journey.
Absolutely. And
How do I do it?
I like to call a roadmap a GPS sometimes.
Absolutely. How do I do that? I'm a trained mentor. I offer coaching. I'm a trainer. I believe that all four of us have collaborated in so many spaces. And between us, our mentor base is so diverse. Again, that word keeps coming up, diverse. Our mentor base is so diverse. And through our collaborative networks, when we are collaborating in a diverse space and we come an area of specialism that we do not have, we simply network and bring in the right person or individuals to deal with a situation at hand. And by all means, the audience that are with us today, please connect with me, connect with us, and let's form the partnership to take you places.
Thank you so much, Femi. And last but not least, Pamela.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. So for me, right, how do we as people redress this imbalance? Right, to do that is a tall ask. And the way I see it is any space I find myself in, I begin to address issues. So I start with wherever I find myself, as I said, firstly, I work in an organization. So I can basically address it from an organizational perspective, from what I do outside of work and from what I do within my family as well. Because change comes at different levels and imbalances and injustices are not going to be solved in a day. So
Yeah.
one of the things I would do is wherever you find yourself, be it within your organization, as Itopa rightly mentioned, organizations have networks. And how do you influence is through networks. Because I have found out that doing things in isolation gets you in trouble. You cannot be a lone ranger, and you cannot seem to be anti-establishment a lot of times, especially when you're working within the confines of an organization. So you channel your change through an organization, and by the nature of our jobs, we are change agents, we are
Yep.
coaches. So we're there to actually help address a lot of behaviors. And what better place to do that than within your network, within your organization. So that's one way of doing, of basically trying to redress. And within organizations, I could go on forever with when it comes to, diversity, inclusion, equity, and balance and all that. So we're not going to go there right now. We've already spoken
No,
about that. Then the second
absolutely.
way is what you do outside of work. Right, we have mentorship groups. We have organizations that we are affiliated with, and by offering our services, by educating, by creating forums, by discussing and creating awareness, that awareness. And one of my biggest passion is, I don't know, with other countries, but we in some certain parts of the world, you have lots of police brutality, you have all these different situations that are happening, and this is actually affecting the mental state of our young boys. I have a passion for young boys, so running youth groups and partnering with other people that run youth groups as well. I come from a very, very close knit family, and we're literally in each other's business. So every young child that comes through my family has the privilege of sitting under us, and we begin to school, help, nurture, and bring up that child in a way that we know that he will be confident, he will be able to express himself, and at the same time have boundaries in which he'll be able to operate in the wider society. And thirdly, as I said, within our what we do outside and also within our family. So it's an all-encompassing, everyone has a personal responsibility towards addressing and redressing these imbalances in any shape, form, or manner. But the thing we cannot do is we cannot keep quiet.
We cannot.
Silence is not an option. So I'm not saying that you need to carry a placard and a billboard or whatever, and don't intentionally get yourself arrested. But if you need to, do whatever you feel comfortable to do. But the one thing I would like to say is silence is not an option. We have to be active members in making sure that this change happens. Because if you're not doing it for yourself, think about the next generation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Pamela. You've covered everything I wanted to say. It's about our sphere of influence. It starts with us, and silence is not an option. And by God, that is what we're doing here today. And I can't thank you all enough. Pamela, thank you so much for spending your Sunday with me. Itopa, Femi Odelusi, thank you all so much. I believe we've done justice to the conversation. And my apologies for the 8 minutes glitches we had at the beginning there.
It happens.
Thank you, Mary. It's always fun to have these discussions.
Yeah.
Honestly, it is. So
Thank-
thank you all so much. And to our audience, I cannot thank you enough. It's great to be back. Next week, we'll be having Pete Omotoshaw, and we're going to be talking about agile adoption versus transformation. That should be an interesting one. So thank you all so much. Thank you, everyone. See you next Sunday, same
Thank
time, same
you.
Thank
place.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye.